In the shadows of monarchy lie untold tales, 30 royal figures whose stories the crown endeavoured to conceal. Behind the grandeur of palaces and the finesse of titles exists a hidden lineage, one crafted not by heirs or conflicts but rather through clandestine letters, lost companions, and affections that history sought to erase. These narratives are not mere gossip, they are overlooked fragments of the past. Welcome to a concealed facet of royalty, where authority mingled with romance, leaving no successors in its wake. Presenting 30 secret gay British royals. Once you decipher this pattern, your perception of the crown will undeniably shift. Before we plunge deeper, ensure you're subscribed. Your support keeps these hidden chronicles alive. And while you're at it, share a comment. Where are you tuning in from? Is it midnight in Manchester or 3 a.m. in Manila? We are eager to know who is alongside us in unearthing these secrets. Let's begin with King James VI and I, a monarch notable for uniting two crowns, Scotland and England. Yet, he devoted enormous energy to romantic entanglements that strayed far from governance, unless one considers the governance of hearts. In the 17th century, the mere notion of a king with feelings for another man was loaded with potential peril. Yet, James not only embraced the whispers but welcomed them, sharing drinks and sweet nothings in Latin. His relationships weren't fleeting flings behind courtly veils. They involved young men granted titles, lands, and proximity not just to power, but to James's private chambers and thoughts, which echoed with longing in his letters. One significant love was Robert Carr, the Earl of Somerset. Their meeting at a jousting event saw Carr literally tumble into the king's good graces. James educated him, raised his status, and bestowed powers that were overwhelming. This crossroads led to a scandal entwined with murder, imprisonment, and a woman unfairly blamed. James's loyalty to Carr persisted longer than wise, yet politics was seldom his focal point. More defining was his relationship with George Villiers, the notorious Duke of Buckingham. Charismatic and handsome, Villiers entered James's life like an artful serenade. The king affectionately referred to him as my sweet child and wife, inscribing letters infused with devotion, proclaiming, "I desire only to live in this world for your sake." While official records attempted to script their bond, categorizing it as platonic or nobly affectionate, skepticism hung in the air, especially in Parliament, which grew increasingly uneasy witnessing a king enraptured in poetry. Undeterred, James promoted Villiers to opulent positions, ignoring the resentment from nobles who perceived such favoritism as treacherous. It wasn't merely the emotional closeness that fueled the scandal, it was their public displays. James wasn't concealing his affections. They travelled together, shared touches in public, and defended one another in council, living together without pretext. The visual implications were undeniable, and intentionally so. Scholars have teetered over the true essence of their relationship, whether sexual, romantic, or simply profound emotional ties, but the reality remains elusive. In James's case, this elusiveness often resembled defiance, as he was a product of a harsh, suspicious Scottish court, yet he chose to pen love letters on royal stationery. Even in his death, the mystique persisted. James arranged for Villiers to lie near him in eternal rest. A fellow commentator remarked, "They shall rest together in the dust, as they did in life." Whether this reflects poetic sentiment or moral reproach remains debatable. But undeniably, James's reign marked not just the birth of the United Kingdom, but also the inception of a fraught legacy, powerful men loving one another in ways their era refused to acknowledge. Yet James continually named it with titles, letters, and endless verses, leading us to his successor, a king who travelled a similar road, yet with far more ruthless repercussions, Edward, who cherished a man known as Piers. In the chronicles of history, One figure stands out: Edward II of England. While King James penned sonnets for his beloveds, Edward's legacy is woven from whispered tales, tragic legacies, and the stunning downfall of a reign beset by a singular, perilous affection. Unlike James's tender verses, Edward's heart clung stubbornly to an obsession that blurred the lines between passion and dominion. From early on, he was not destined for greatness. Instead of wrestling with statecraft, Edward reveled in melodies, leisurely rowing, and the companionship of charming young men. Unbeknownst to him, his affection for one man, Piers Gaveston, would ignite a scandal that would ripple through the ages. Gaveston, lacking noble birth, was a figure of striking beauty, boundless ambition, and alarming confidence, an elevation that rattled the established nobility. Edward, in a bold move, crowned him Earl of Cornwall, a title typically reserved for royalty, showering him with riches and honours that sparked outrage among the barons. Opinions erupted. Many deemed their bond as something beyond mere friendship, a sentiment gently understated. The barons were incensed, the clergy horrified, and Queen Isabella of France, no stranger to political intrigue, found herself sidelined in a marriage ostensibly created for heirs and to avoid scandal, tasks they both fulfilled rather poorly. Gaveston's presence at court was undeniable. He moved with the king, boasting a regal demeanour and laughing thunderously at jokes that seemed more personal than political. Edward, undeterred by warnings and threats from the nobility, repeatedly brought Gaveston back after his exile. Upon his return, celebrations erupted, complete with excessive fanfare that made even royal ceremonies appear modest. The nobility saw not just favoritism but a threat to their very power. A love so pronounced it began to twist the very foundation of the monarchy. As with many untamed affections, this one culminated in a disturbing end woven with betrayal and blood, transformed quietly within the annals of history. When Gaveston was captured and executed under the guise of protecting the kingdom, Edward's devastation segued into calculated vengeance, disguised as strategic realignment in the chronicles. Yet, he failed to change his ways, replacing Gaveston with a man of equal ambition, Hugh Despenser the Younger. Despenser was a less extravagant but equally detested figure, and once more, the court simmered with discontent, and the Queen, Isabella, watched and waited. In time, she launched a rebellion with her lover, a French nobleman, leading to Edward's downfall, imprisonment, and disgrace. Officially labelled misrule, the true reason lay cloaked in the unheard whispers of his entire reign, a forbidden love that the kingdom could not bear. To this day, historians continue to ponder the depth and authenticity of these passions. The letters, gifts, and titles remain as a testament to how Edward II's personal desires reshaped a monarchy and how England mirrored that transformation. His audacity invoked the shield of medieval law. Centuries later, echoes of his struggle would reverberate in a new royal, a man of the 20th century, a duke entangled in similar desires, navigating through the labyrinth of palace myths. As you delve deeper into this historical rabbit hole, we invite you to subscribe. There is much more intrigue awaiting discovery. Share in the comments below. Where are you watching from, and what time ticks by as you indulge in these tales? Are you sipping coffee amidst the past or wide awake in the still of the night, much like the rest of us? 3. Prince George, Duke of Kent. While some individuals enter a world steeped in quietude, Prince George was ushered into the vibrant realm of jazz. The fourth son of King George V, a monarch so emotionally constrained that he rebuked his children for merely walking with exuberance, George embodied a different spirit. He strode through life like a man in search of his own epic narrative, an enigma cloaked in royal garb, with an insatiable thirst for experience. His life unfolds like an unwritten film script. He was a pilot, a poet, a naval officer, a seeker of highs, rumoured to be bisexual, a tabloid sensation, and a tragic figure steeped in myth. Yet amid the swirling whispers of his escapades, one question reverberates: who was he truly? What is clear is that he thrived in elevated circles. Unlike his restrained siblings, George exuded charm, dangerously so. He was the royal most frequently found at sophisticated gatherings, art exhibits, and behind curtains in dressing rooms. He indulged in literature, played the saxophone, mingled with the legendary Greta Garbo, imbibed champagne copiously, and famously, reportedly swam unclothed in the luxurious fountains of Versailles. But lurking beneath the polished exterior, shadows loomed, rumors that linked him with sharp-witted artistic souls, notably Noel Coward, the playwright who called George beautifully absurd and unlike any royal before him. Their bond defied convention, full of intensity, and private correspondence between them mysteriously vanished after George's passing, suggesting a narrative deeper than mere friendly exchanges. Another figure rising from this haze is Anthony Blunt, later recognized as a Soviet spy and part of the notorious Cambridge Five. Intelligent and secretive, Blunt's exact ties to George remain undocumented, yet that has not quelled rampant speculation. Some accounts depict George as an active participant in risky liaisons, while others portray him as a victim of circumstance, blurring the distinctions between his public responsibilities and private aspirations. The royal family officially rebukes all conjecture. Biographies describe George as a captivating yet troubled persona. His marriage to Princess Marina of Greece, striking and charming, yielded 3 children and fulfilled royal obligations. However, the aura of scandal clung to him, a persistent scent he could not dispel. His life met a shrouded end in a plane crash in 1942 during active duty with the Royal Air Force. Official accounts were ambiguous, the passenger list incomplete, and conspiracy theories flourished in the void. Could it have been sabotage, a perilous assignment, or the inevitable fate of a man who danced beyond royal restrictions? Even now, his resting place at Frogmore seems too tranquil for someone who so vivaciously traversed the shadows of his era. But George was not alone in navigating such tumultuous waters. Only years earlier, another royal was treading a similar precarious path, this time amidst the complexities of war, empire, and secrets buried deep within MI5 vaults. 4. Lord Mountbatten. In the refined vernacular of royal eulogies, Lord Louis Mountbatten is characterized as a figure of duty, service, and notable achievements. He served as a naval hero, the final Viceroy of India, a guiding force for Prince Charles, and the uncle of Prince Philip, mastering the orchestrations of royal ceremonies and image cultivation. Yet, beneath those immaculate white uniforms and the polished demeanor of imperial grace, Mountbatten's life was shrouded in hushed rumors. His legacy entwined with whispers that never found their way into official accounts, yet they lingered on persistently. He had ties to MI5, undoubtedly, a mere glimpse into a life filled with controversial undertones. Declassified documents allude to unorthodox aspects of his private existence, hinting at a preference for young men, described in a deliberately ambiguous manner, clinical yet loaded with implications. This file trailed him throughout his lengthy tenure under the royal spotlight. Mountbatten's marriage to Edwina Ashley was one that served social strategy rather than emotional fulfillment. Their famously open relationship led to Edwina's numerous affairs, which were celebrated in the public eye, while Louis's indiscretions were relegated to the shadows of intelligence briefs. His friendships with young male aides and military cadets were noted for their unusual closeness, interlaced with suspicions of deeper connections. Though the official narrative painted him as a benevolent figure, devoted to mentoring young minds, especially those in uniform, recollections varied. Many describe him as utterly charismatic. Conversely, those within intelligence circles viewed him more skeptically, labeling him compromised or potentially a security liability due to his private escapades. Despite the palpable tension, no allegations emerged into the public sphere. The press remained circumspect, the palace silent, and Mountbatten, ever vigilant, maintained his stature as a senior figure in the royal family. He guided Charles in the arts of demeanour and decorum, their correspondence deep and personal. Some of Charles's most heartfelt letters as a youth were directed towards Mountbatten. The nature of their bond, whether it was paternal, controlling, or something less easily defined, cast a long shadow. When Mountbatten met his end at the hands of the IRA in 1979, the announcement sent ripples of grief. A respected statesman lost, a symbol destroyed. Yet the official narrative fell short, leaving the deeper nuances of his character and secretive life buried alongside him. Perhaps poignantly, one of those concealed truths resonates within the very generation he shepherded. The next royal in this unfolding tale flourished under Mountbatten's attentive gaze, a future king shaped by a man who never quite divulged all his truths, a prince encircled by astute, sophisticated men, some of whom understood him far more profoundly than any of his own kin ever could. 5. Prince Edward, the Duke of Windsor. It's quite the twist that this man, who renounced the British throne for love, is still primarily remembered for his affections towards the so-called wrong woman. Yet, history often shies away from questioning if Wallace Simpson constituted the entire narrative, or if Edward, later known as the Duke of Windsor, obscured a more intricate reality, that his romantic inclinations might not have been as uncomplicated as royal historians suggest. Edward was familiar with scandal, making headlines for his dalliance with American divorcees, frequenting Parisian nightclubs, and boldly criticizing the very institution he was destined to lead. However, hidden under the glitz and defiance lay quieter, enduring speculations. The king, long before his love for Wallace blossomed, curated a social existence that left the royal palace on edge. A vibrant circle of artistic, theatrical, cosmopolitan men, many of whom were openly gay or subtly coded their identities, surrounded him. Throughout his younger years, Edward mingled with an eclectic assembly of aesthetes, designers, actors, and European courtiers who navigated the fluidity of gender and desire effortlessly. His relationships with these men were deep and intense, well chronicled by society pages that never fully expressed the shared hidden truths. His legendary flair for style extended beyond mere vanity. It embodied a form of curation for himself, his surroundings, and those closest to him. Yet many of these curated men had tastes and secrets that hinted Edward's sexual orientation was far broader than his royal image suggested. One recurring, yet rarely addressed rumor ties him to his personal valet, men who were his companions, caretakers, and shared his intimate space for years, leaving little public trace aside from suspiciously lavish legacies. In personal correspondence, Edward's language concerning these men indicated a connection steeped in emotional complexity, suggesting more than the typical employer-staff dynamic. As for Wallace, in the tradition of shielding influential figures, she may have served less as a lover and more as a protective facade. While she played the role of seductress, whispers implied she functioned as his most devoted accomplice, always aware of what aspects of Edward's life required veiling, and skilled in executing that concealment with flair. After abdicating, Edward lived in glamorous exile, ensconced in a self-made twilight that resembled freedom, yet often felt like confinement. In Paris, he mingled with the affluent and fallen alike, attended exhibitions financed by former lovers of his companions, and seemed detached from the world around him, except for the performances he offered. The official narrative claims he sacrificed it all for love. But what if the reality diverged? What if relinquishing the throne was prompted not by love, but by an understanding that remaining would require forsaking his truest self? his capacity to love in ways unrecognized by the crown. And if Edward chose exile to guard that truth, the next ruler, however, faced a different fate. He reigned amid shadowy whispers, tales of handsome favourites, moonlit encounters, and clandestine gardens, far removed from the realm of politics. 6. King William III. History often prefers its monarchs to be strong, devout, and conventionally romantic. Known widely as William of Orange, this Protestant champion disrupted his Catholic father-in-law's reign and established constitutional monarchy in Britain, checking most of those desirable boxes. Yet, beneath the elaborate wigs and celebrated victories lay a peculiar, lesser-known reality. William had favourites that extended beyond mere politics. His joint reign with Mary II is marked by significant religious shifts and a notably frosty relationship with his wife. Mary was pious, dutiful, yet frequently solitude-stricken. William, on the other hand, was often described as emotionally detached, blunt, and cold. While official narratives attribute their rift to political strains, a deeper examination reveals closer ties with certain men who were granted unusual privileges. Among them, two individuals cast shadows over William's public persona: Hans Willem Bentinck and Arnold Just van Kiel. These Dutch nobles were not only military men but also intimately involved in the king's life. Bentinck, who stood by William from the outset, was more than just an advisor. He was a confidant entrusted with vital aspects of the king's existence. During William's bout with smallpox, it was Bentinck who risked his own health for the king's sake, earning titles and lands that evoked jealousy among the English elite. Yet, it was Van Kiel who stirred the fiercest controversy. Younger, charismatic, and flamboyant, Van Kiel quickly rose through the ranks at court, achieving positions that defied expected protocol. Within a year, he served as master of the robes and groom of the bedchamber, sharing the king's private quarters on several well-documented occasions. It was clear that William didn't just favour these companions, he fundamentally depended on them. Contemporary letters described Van Kiel as the king's delight, the one upon whom all smiles rested. Meanwhile, Parliament was far less amused. Whispers of peculiar affections circulated vigorously, while political cartoons began depicting William in suggestive scenarios alongside his favourites. Even some clergymen, grateful for his Protestant leadership, expressed concerns about suspicious influences at court, albeit in coded language. To this day, historians remain divided over the nature of these relationships. Were they truly physical, emotional, or mere fodder for rival speculation? Nevertheless, William's actions indicate these attachments were far from typical. When Bentinck dared to contest Van Kiel's influence, William's response was one of icy defensiveness, protecting Van Kiel relentlessly and even delegating crucial negotiations to him, baffling seasoned diplomats and infuriating ministers. Upon William's death in 1702, a bachelor without heirs, Van Kiel was left with titles and lands, yet his reputation remained wounded. The royal court quietly distanced itself, artworks were removed, and documents vanished. Yet, traces linger in the intimate letters, rapid promotions, and the pattern of William's enduring bonds, always male, always youthful, and always a hint too close. In this tapestry of complicated affiliations and favoured companions, the next royal would soon emerge into history, marked by wine, rebellion, and betrayal. His demise became legendary, and the whispers of his affections continue to ripple through time. In the shadows of history, we find Prince George, Duke of Clarence, a figure remembered for his striking looks and fateful role as the middle brother to Edward IV and Richard III, a dynasty marred by betrayal. His tale, as told by Shakespeare, sees him meet his end in a barrel of wine, yet in truth, there were far murkier waters that claimed him. George's life was rife with courtly machinations and familial power plays, entangled in the silent whispers that ensnare those who tread too closely alongside their male companions. His existence was one gripping with ambition and naive charm, leading him astray in a world of treachery where loyalty proved elusive. Yet beneath the grand narratives of ambition lay a quieter story, one of intimate friendships that sparked rumors. George was seldom seen alone. His assembly of devoted male associates appeared unusually close. While no outright accusations surfaced, considering the era, shifts in language about Clarence's household hinted at sentiments straying beyond the norm. Here was a man seemingly more invested in his private entourage than in performing his public duties. Amidst this circle flourished a young knight, whose meteoric rise garnered both intrigue and suspicion, relying wholly on George's favor, loyalty that would ultimately prove perilous. Public observers noted the troubling dependence, particularly with a crown at stake. Attempting to usurp Edward IV, George plunged into perilous alliances with enemies and whispered rumors about the Queen, only to find himself ensnared within conspiracies he hardly grasped. His arrest revealed charges of insubordination entwined with hints of impropriety, where testimonies alluded to unmanly influences around him. Letters vanished, and loyal servants mysteriously disappeared, pointing to compromised judgment under the weight of ambition. Edward IV's hand penned the death warrant, sealing a fate richly adorned with irony, being drowned in a claret of his own making, a detail possibly more theatrical than factual but undeniably fitting, as he succumbed to indulgences that defined his being. Publicly, it was treason. Privately, a desperate family sought to mask a scandal that remained unnamed. As George's demise became legendary, so too did the true nature of his affections fade into obscurity, scrubbed from historical annals, smoothed into bland euphemisms, condemned to perish in the Tower alongside his tarnished legacy. Yet here we are, centuries later, uncovering patterns eerily similar. Another prince, embroiled in yet another scandal, a fresh batch of destroyed letters, and a sister-in-law adamant on seizing the truth away from history's grasp. 8. Prince Francis of Teck. Where Prince George, Duke of Clarence, met his downfall due to misplaced loyalty, Prince Francis of Teck stumbled because of the shifting loyalties of those around him. He was not a dominant force in royal affairs. He never held the throne. He never commanded armies. His name may not echo through history in the traditional sense, yet the chaos he stirred privately was profound. Often, the most perilous royals aren't those wielding power. Rather, they are those who possess secrets and lead lives unburdened by responsibility. Known as Frank among friends, Francis was the younger sibling of Queen Mary, who was married to George V and stood as the grandmother to Queen Elizabeth II, a minor royal with profound connections. Frank glided through the circles of the aristocracy, his charm disarming, his days seemingly free from the weight of duty. Handsome and ever flirtatious, he was adored by women and held in fond regard by men. The tales surrounding him commence with whispers, as is customary. He reveled in gatherings, secluded retreats, and extravagantly carefree weekends in country homes, where guest selections leaned more towards personal connections than social standing. His companions included artists, poets, actors, and a plethora of eccentric, unmarried nobles. Frank's escapades often found him vanishing for days with a male companion or two, only to return to London, rejuvenated, vague about his whereabouts, and impeccably attired. He never wed. He left no progeny. The most lasting aspect of his life may well have been the fate of his correspondence posthumously. In 1910, Francis's life was abruptly cut short at the age of 40. His death itself raised no alarms, but the aftermath did. Queen Mary, who typically steered clear of emotional impulses in decision-making, reportedly initiated a thorough eradication of his private possessions. Letters were obliterated, diaries disappeared without a trace, and rumors abounded that even his will was quietly modified under duress. This swift, discreet maneuvering received the full endorsement of the palace. But why? This question continues to haunt historians. Some theorize love letters to men were among his belongings. Others imagine he may have been the target of blackmail. And there are notions that he engaged in clandestine liaisons with individuals keen to avoid exposure. Regardless, the response was immediate, almost surgical in precision. Queen Mary, who cultivated a frosty and flawless public persona, treated her brother's legacy as if it represented a security risk. This raises a profound inquiry. What was it that she sought to shield? Was it Francis's dignity, or the integrity of the monarchy? His existence is scarcely acknowledged in historical records. He stands as a mere footnote, a shadow within the family saga. Yet, for those delving into the subtle nuances of royal existence, he emerges as an intriguing blank space, a man cherished by many, yet claimed by none, meticulously obliterated from official accounts. And yet, some legacies cannot be fully erased. Consider, for instance, his nephew, an heir seemingly destined for it all, who found himself enmeshed in whispers of his own, surrounded by a scandal so notorious it entwined him with notoriety, secrecy, and a brothel that few dared to discuss openly. 9. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence. Born into a destiny that promised kingship, Albert Victor's life remains a fleeting whisper of what might have been. History casts him as a striking yet frail figure, forever captured in oil paintings, showcasing a soft jawline and weary eyes, as if yearning for a life far removed from the pressures he faced. The firstborn of Edward III and Queen Alexandra, and the grandson of the formidable Queen Victoria, Albert Victor was heir apparent at the peak of the British Empire's grandeur. However, beneath the polished exterior lay the burdens of a storied lineage, along with what some whispered to be a haunting secret that trailed him fervently. His troubles began while still in military uniform. Serving with the British Army in India, followed by studies at Cambridge, neither path resonated with Albert Victor's spirit. Friends painted him as distracted and emotionally delicate, finding solace in fervent bonds with other young men, friendships whispered about but seldom understood. Then arrived 189, a year that would intertwine his fate with scandal. London was engulfed in the Cleveland Street scandal, a sensational inquiry into a male brothel frequented by the upper echelons of society, even rumored to involve individuals from royal circles. When revelations emerged, it threatened the very fabric of the establishment. Despite no official charges against him, one name emerged persistently: Prince Albert Victor. The palace responded with surprising fervor. Editors were silenced, publications seized, and witnesses discreetly whisked away. While he remained publicly untouchable, privately, his reputation suffered irrevocably. Supporters defended him as naive, ensnared by guilt by association, while critics noted his vacillating behavior and the disquieting number of letters destroyed after the events unfolded. Some whispered of blackmail, others spoke of concealed protection. Queen Victoria, already protective of her grandson's fragile disposition, pushed for a seamless match to Princess Mary of Teck, the same Mary who would later marry his brother George and ascend as queen. Yet, fate had other plans. Albert Victor passed away in 1892, at a tender age of 28, officially from influenza complicated by pneumonia. His demise was abrupt, tragic, and tinged with an air of suspicion that lingered just beyond proof. The funeral was grand but eerily void of sincerity toward the man behind the title he bore. To this day, historians find themselves at odds. Was Albert Victor merely a pawn in a game of whispers, Or was he a confused soul ensnared in the complexities of royal expectations? Regardless, the silence that envelops his story echoes volumes. This silence, a recurring motif for his lineage, begs reflection, for the next royal would go on to demonstrate that even those who bravely battled for the crown were not exempt from the suffocating shadows of secrecy, nor from the deep and often perplexing connections forged in the crucible of conflict. 10. Prince Rupert of the Rhine. Prince Rupert of the Rhine is a name that echoes through the annals of history, frequently recalled for his audacious adventures, his dynamic cavalry charges, and, of course, his flowing locks that danced in the winds of battlefields steeped in the turmoil of the Civil War. Painted as a romanticized symbol of a noble soldier, he embodied the spirit of a daring warrior. Yet, beneath the bold imagery and the lore of the musketeer lies a figure much more complex. He was not merely a war hero, he was an enigmatic blend of pirate, alchemist, and artist, intricately linked as a devoted nephew to King Charles I, a man said to have formed deep emotional bonds with his comrades. Rupert's life began amidst upheaval, thrust into exile from the Palatinate during his youth, arriving in England already burdened by loss. His uncle, Charles I, recognized in him a potent symbol of royal defiance, promoting him to lead the royalist cavalry in the English Civil War. On the battlefield, he distinguished himself, yet off the field, he became a figure of increasing intrigue. Rupert drew around him a tight-knit circle of fellow officers, men who admired his daring spirit, frequently joining him in reckless endeavors, and maintaining a bond that transcended the mere shared experience of war. Among these companions were royalist soldiers with whom Rupert shared not just skirmishes, but long-lasting correspondence, intimate travels, and a closeness that left many warriors pondering its depths. Fragments of their letters survive, tinged with poetic adoration and emotional expression that challenge conventional notions of 17th-century friendship. One particular officer, repeatedly mentioned in Rupert's letters, was described as his steadfast companion, cherished above all. Legends tell of Rupert refusing to abandon this officer, even amid the chaos of battle. When this beloved comrade perished, Rupert sank into profound sorrow, retreating into solitude and reportedly abstaining from food for several days. To some, it was a noble expression of grief. To others, it hinted at a deeper complexity, an affection that transcended the boundaries of the battlefield's traditional ideals of masculinity. Publicly, Rupert's persona remained stanchly heterosexual. In the years following the war, he ventured into overseas trade, engaged in hunting pirates, and pursued scientific endeavors, ever the restless spirit. He never took a wife, yet fathered an acknowledged illegitimate daughter, a testament to his potency, no doubt. Nevertheless, the nature of his closest ties, formed in blood-soaked camps rather than courtly halls, stubbornly defies simple interpretation. The intricacies lie within Rupert himself. He was a man of intense emotion, forming rapid attachments and expressing sentiments that resembled devotion more than mere camaraderie. In court, some deemed him arrogant. Amongst his troops, his charisma shone brightly. Meanwhile, rivals often recorded his name alongside language typically reserved for lovers, obscuring the boundaries between friendship and passion. Ultimately, Rupert's life drew to a close not amidst clashing swords, but within the walls of his study, a man of invention and royal rebellion, whose public persona remained at odds with the intensity of the connections he forged. His legacy was neatly packaged, crafted into the myth of a romantic war hero, comfortably heterosexual, and simplistically noble. Still, the patterns of his life reveal a convergence of men, amidst royalty and cannon fire, who repeatedly found solace in each other's company. The story of the next royal in this quiet lineage would remain cloaked in uniforms and formality, revealing just enough to provoke curiosity yet withholding enough to leave questions unanswered. Henry, Duke of Gloucester, A quiet royal's untold story. In the grand tapestry of royal portraits, there exists a figure whose solemn demeanour stands in stark contrast to the rest: Henry, Duke of Gloucester. The third son of King George V and brother to Edward VII and George VI, Henry was the reserved member of the royal family. Unlike his siblings who basked in the allure of publicity, he chose to remain in the shadows, surfacing only to fulfill royal protocols. While Edward danced with notoriety and George hesitated painfully into kingship, Henry adhered to the periphery, his silence a powerful testament to a hidden narrative. Unbeknownst to many, his life was fraught with unspoken complexities. With a cursory glance, one might see a checklist of duty, a military education, ceremonial appearances, and regal tours across the globe. Yet, beneath this structured exterior lay a tapestry woven with deep emotional connections. During his military postings across Africa and the Middle East, Henry formed profound bonds with his male aides, individuals who transitioned from mere duty to steadfast emotional companions. The letters that survive from this period paint a revealing picture of Henry's inner world. He expressed feelings of disorientation when apart from a particular aide, craving his presence for stability and comfort. The words hint at something more than friendship, an ambiguity that remains unvoiced but undeniable. Observers noted these unusual attachments, and military contemporaries deemed Henry's displays of emotion towards certain aides as excessive. Royal biographers, burdened by the weight of silence, often glossed over substantial segments of his life, signifying the unspoken truths that danced in the background. His later marriage to Lady Alice Montague Douglas Scott, at the age of 41, seemed to fit the mold of propriety but lacked the warmth of intimacy. Their union was marked by formality, while Henry's enduring friendships with men from his wartime experiences persisted, keeping the spectre of his true self alive. In stark contrast to Edward's flamboyance, Henry's life unfolded amidst careful restraint, suggesting a royal adept at navigating the treacherous waters of unacknowledged truths. The palace was skilled at managing secrets, particularly those that remained quietly under the radar. When Henry passed away in 1974, he received royal honors but left behind an emotional void, a narrative only partially understood. Even today, he remains a somewhat obscured figure in the lineage of George V, embodying the silent struggles of royal men constrained by the inability to articulate their affections. From wartime camaraderie to the opulent gatherings of Edwardian London, the layers of secrecy wrap around his story like a velvet curtain hiding myriad tales. The next name in this covert lineage beckons. A noble descendant graced the elite world where secrets were draped in elegance, and whispered truths lingered in the soft glow of champagne flutes. 12. Lord Louis Francis Graravel. A name that may elude many, yet its obscurity speaks volumes. Born of the illustrious Plantagenet lineage through the Earl of Warwick, Lord Louis Francis Graravel carried a noble bloodline, but his presence was more ornamental than influential. Picture him as a brilliant, unofficial companion to the monarchy, close enough to partake in lavish gatherings yet distant enough to retreat when complexities arose. Graravel belonged to a distinct segment of the Edwardian elite, aristocratic, graceful, and subtly woven into the emotional interplay among influential men. Though he entered nobility, he was not bound by its expectations. With fluid elegance, he navigated the upper echelons of British society, fully aware of the unspoken rules and adept at circumventing them with finesse. Educated and captivating, he held a particular passion for aesthetics, fashion, architecture, and the nuanced art of dinner conversation, all contributing to his enigmatic aura. In another time, he might have been a courtier, yet in Edwardian England, he was something more elusive, an insider deeply respected, but seldom questioned. His existence is primarily chronicled through snippets, guest lists, letters, social invitations, and the whispers of gossip columns that fleetingly mentioned his name, often linked to others. One contemporary noblewoman's diary captures his essence: impossibly polished, strikingly handsome, and seen with rare women. She dryly notes, "The wives adore him because he poses no threat. The husbands value him for his listening skills." Garavel mingled within an influential circle, later recognized as part of England's discreet homosexual aristocracy, inclined to gather in private salons or elaborate garden soirees, sharing dialogues on art and politics amidst a backdrop of unvoiced understanding. In these spaces, male affection was not only accepted but taken for granted, with Garavel often at the heart of such interactions. His story unfolds intriguingly against the starkness of royal decorum juxtaposed with the liberating undercurrents of his chosen companions. He graced royal events, dined alongside princes, and was captured in photographs with lesser royals whose identities faded from public memory. A preserved personal letter in a family archive labels him a keeper of unspoken secrets, an aristocratic phrase hinting he was privy to clandestine liaisons and their perils. No scandals or court confessions marred his legacy. Such was his talent, living towards the edges of society while perpetually in earshot of power. Garavel's existence, coded in layers of queerness, was neither formally acknowledged nor obscured. He became essential for the right people yet eluded notice from others, a tactic as ancient as royalty itself. Post-Great War, his name waned, mirroring the decline of the drawing-room dynasties thriving in pre-war Britain. However, his archetype, the discreet, emotionally savvy aristocrat, did not vanish. It simply transformed. In the succeeding generation, this figure emerged with greater clarity, a more pronounced presence, and with more considerable stakes. The upcoming royal on our agenda rejected the notion of lingering in salons or shuffling through subordinate titles. He was a prince destined for kingship, shaped from a young age by the very companionship that kings were often reluctant to acknowledge. Before he ascended to the throne as King Charles III, there existed a quieter time when he was simply known as Charles, the Prince of Wales. Nestled within the imposing walls of royalty, he was a young boy immersed in a world that cherished emotional restraint as a virtue, casting aside vulnerability as a weakness. In the realm of monarchy, introspection is a rarity, yet Charles broke that mold, and that very trait made him a figure of intrigue. With an artistic spirit and a sensitivity that ran deep, he carried the weight of his father's disapproval for his embarrassing traits. The confines of the palace echoed with secrets, absorbing the unfiltered thoughts and feelings of a boy grappling with his identity. His relationship with Lord Mountbatten is well documented, a mentor on the surface, but their connection was more intense, layered with a complexity that hinted at emotional dependence. In his letters to Uncle Dickie, the young Charles glimpsed into his own insecurities and the gnawing discomfort of his royal duties. Mountbatten was not merely a guide. He provided the kind of attention that Charles sought but rarely received from others. While the public dubbed their bond as close, and historians viewed it as mentorship, those discerning enough recognized a deeper complexity. Mountbatten curated a circle of sophisticated companions for Charles, worldly men who flitted in and out of his life, embodying unmatched elegance but harboring enigmatic pasts. These were not the traditional aristocrats. Instead, they were diplomats, artists, and intellectuals who appreciated conversation and emotional depth. However, such friendships raised eyebrows within royal circles. One connection, with a theatre director known for ties to artistic gay communities, strayed too close to discomfort for some palace aides, although it was never officially condemned. Another relationship, with a former valet, met a quieter end when whispers about their closeness prompted a discreet reassignment. While scandals never erupted, shadows of caution hung over Charles. He soon understood that even camaraderie was subject to scrutiny. Importantly, There's no substantiated evidence that Charles engaged in romantic affairs with other men. Speculation has remained just that, conjecture. What is well documented, however, is the fervent emotional attachment Charles formed with older male figures and flamboyant friends. The palace observed these dynamics, and the media eagerly analyzed them for gossip, often misinterpreting their significance. During the 1970s and early 80s, before the world knew of Diana, Charles was often seen alongside close male companions at exclusive gatherings. Some of these friendships endured, while others faded mysteriously from view after brief but intense closeness. To the casual observer, it appeared to be a revolving door of loyal allies. Yet, palace insiders harbored concerns about the potential for public relations complications. Charles himself offered no explanations. His existence was a tapestry woven from complexity within a system that preferred simplicity. His public persona revolved around constitutional obligations, while his private thoughts, marked by heartfelt letters and a profound mourning of lost friendships, remained artfully concealed. He was navigating a modern monarchy under increasing scrutiny. As we turn our gaze to the next figure in this intricate narrative, we find someone without the protections Charles enjoyed. This prince exists in both literal and metaphorical exile, donning crimson robes, not to honor a throne, but to assert a quiet defiance against one. No longer encumbered by the obligations of royalty, he chose a different path altogether, trading crowns for the poised demeanor of a cardinal and the fleeting favors of the court for something far less tangible but undeniably profound. In the twilight years of the House of Stuart, a final glimmer of royal lineage emerged not as a warrior, but as a figure swathed in crimson robes, steeped in mystery. Prince Henry Benedict Stuart, the Cardinal Duke of York, came into this world in exile, lived enveloped in ritual, and departed from it amid gold-embroidered vestments, his life surrounded by whispered secrets rarely inscribed in the annals of history. He was the son of James Francis Edward Stuart, the so-called Old Pretender, and the younger sibling of Charles Edward Stuart, famously known as Bonnie Prince Charlie. Yet, while his brother engaged in revelry and the pursuit of a lost monarchy throughout the Scottish Highlands, Henry embarked on an alternative journey, a life devoted to the Catholic Church. This may appear as a retreat from the taint of royal scandal, but for Henry, it was a transformation of identity, a sanctification of his heritage rather than a renunciation. Ordained a cardinal by the time he was just 22, his ascent was more a matter of ancestry than religious insight. He became a figure of significance in the papal court, the last male scion of the Stuart line, draped in ceremonial authority and sentiments of dynastic legacy. His elevated title was Cardinal Bishop of Frascati, yet behind closed doors, he was informally recognized as King Henry IX, a moniker embraced by the dwindling Jacobites who clung to their claim of the British throne. Yet beneath the grandeur of his clergy robes, Henry led a remarkably secluded existence. His life was characterized by periods of introspection, artistic patronage, and close bonds with other men from both noble and ecclesiastical realms in Rome. One of his companions, a younger cleric of minor aristocratic descent, shared a decade-long rapport with Henry that preserved correspondence hinting at a relationship rich in emotion and fervent affection. Neither the Vatican nor the British monarchical circle dared to publicly question these associations, both parties benefiting from an unspoken understanding. However, Roman society, a realm skilled in the art of veiled truths, was acutely aware of Henry's private devotions and his select cadre of companions. Observers frequently commented on the exclusive nature of his inner circle, often shaded by euphemism and protective language. In truth, Henry remained unmarried, childless, and spent his days supporting churches, amassing art, and engaging in spiritual readings with young men who shared his affinity for the sacred and the solitary. When Charles Edward Stuart passed away in 1788, Henry inherited the vacant title of King of England, Scotland, and Ireland, at least for the few who continued to care. While he acknowledged the claim, he refrained from pursuing it, with no military endeavours or declarations, just more rituals and profound silence. He passed away in 1807 and was interred in St. Peter's Basilica, the sole British royal to rest there. His lavish funeral was attended by cardinals, a subtle homage to a lineage that had long faded into legend. Yet what spoke volumes were the unvoiced omissions. Not a single woman wept at his funeral, no descendants mentioned in his will, just a conspicuous gathering of male clerics and nobles who, for reasons untold, had devoted their lives to him. Thus, another chapter closed. A royal leading a life of exile not only from his homeland but from the very definitions of kingship. But history has its equilibrium. As Henry's saga unfolded amid opulent palaces and sacred sanctuaries, the next royal narrative would unravel not in hushed tones, but through the biting ink of 19th century scandal, a name emblazoned across pamphlets, as a palace scrambled for damage control. 15. Prince Ernest Augustus, Duke of Cumberland. Certain figures fade into obscurity by chance, while others are methodically forgotten. Prince Ernest Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, undoubtedly belongs to the latter. Born in 1771 as the fifth son of King George III, his rise to the throne was never anticipated. Yet, through the curious logic of royal lineage, he became King of Hanover. Yet his stature never quite matched his titles. If the tales are to be believed, he spent much of his life evading their weight. His political legacy is well established. Even by the conservative standards of the 19th century, he stood firm against reform, liberal ideals, and the winds of societal change. Nevertheless, it wasn't his political stance that garnered infamy but rather a cloud of rumours and allegations that lurked in pamphlets, court gossip, and clandestine letters, material that the royal family seemed intent on eliminating. In the early 1800s, he became the subject of anonymous pamphlets that made veiled but unmistakable accusations against him regarding inappropriate conduct with male servants. The language was artfully crafted, euphemistic yet insinuating, vague enough to skirt legal consequences. Yet for those familiar with the era's unspoken codes, the implications rang loud and clear. The controversies he faced were not merely political. They delved into personal realms, intimate and clandestinely conducted behind closed doors. The royal response was immediate and ruthlessly defensive. Denials, legal threats, and an eerie silence in public discourse. However, behind this facade lay a palpable dread. Private letters from courtiers revealed King George III was notably shaken by these claims, worried about their potential damage to the family's already tarnished reputation. Ernest, for his part, vehemently refuted all allegations, claiming slander, political betrayal, and bold-faced lies as the basis for the rumours. Officially, this marked the end of the matter, but the whispers never faded. They merely sank beneath the surface. Several of Ernest's longtime male attendants were discreetly reassigned, with 2 disappearing from royal service without explanation. One, a young footman who caught the Duke's favour, left England and resurfaced in Vienna, serving an Austrian count linked to the British elite. No documents to trace his journey. The silence echoed further in the scarcity of Ernest's personal letters during this scandalous era, a conspicuous absence noted by biographers. One even remarked that the archival silence seemed curated by an overwhelming anxiety. In royal history, the lack of documentation often crafts a compelling narrative. When Ernest ascended as King of Hanover in 1837, the British media silently rejoiced. His departure across the Channel effectively distanced the crown from a problematic figure. His reign was characterized by its rigidity, conservatism, and unpopularity, but the English were content to either forget him or pretend he never existed. He passed in 1851, largely unappreciated, his name seldom uttered by the royal family. Yet the pattern he epitomized, a royal entangled in whispers of male relationships, safeguarded by silence and geographical separation, was hardly an anomaly. Indeed, it resonated through history, often playing out behind closed doors or within lavish estates, where future royals would occasionally indulge in lengthy, notably all-male assemblies disguised as political affairs, soon to be remembered for something far more complex. Charles Lennox, the second Duke of Richmond, found himself at a remarkable intersection of royal privilege and aristocratic excess. Born in 1701 as the illegitimate grandson of King Charles II, he possessed both a noble title and a fortune, granting him a unique status in society, enough royal lineage to earn respect, yet not enough to expect saintly behavior. And by all accounts, he lived up to that lack of expectation. As he matured, the world around him was steeped in opulence and moral ambiguity, characteristic of the Georgian era. This time was notorious for its extravagance and hidden truths, mastering the delicate art of societal double talk, particularly regarding matters of love and friendship. It's evident that Charles's affections stirred considerable intrigue among his contemporaries. Publicly, he wore many hats, that of a soldier, politician, and arts patron, all while flaunting his exquisite taste and launching gatherings at his lavish residences that drew the attention of the elite. These were not mere entertainments. They were intimate retreats held in his London abode and at Goodwood House in Sussex, spaces where politics, poetry, and companionship melded in elusive ways. The gatherings, lasting weeks at times, were frequented by men from his regiment, Parliament, and the arts, featuring readings and private performances that hinted at deeper connections masked in euphemistic language common to the correspondence of that era. One poignant friendship stands out in his letters, with a young officer from Charles's regiment mentioned with an unusual warmth. This officer was more than just a companion. He accompanied Charles on diplomatic missions and shared lengthy holidays, ultimately gaining a pension from the Duke's estate. Although the precise nature of their relationship remains obscured by time, it clearly transcended mere camaraderie and persisted long after their public lives faded. Charles's saga is striking for how deftly he balanced visibility with discretion. He never ventured into marriage, provided no explanations for his friendships, and yet, remarkably, he faced no public disgrace. Perhaps he understood his class's unspoken rules innately, to remain silent, write impressively, and ensure friendships with those formidable enough to shield against public scrutiny. He passed away in 1750, his reputation ostensibly intact, though future biographers grappled with deciphering the complexities of the man behind the title. Was he merely an eccentric patron of the arts, a soulful figure enveloped by other sensitive souls? Or did he weave into the unwritten narrative of royal and aristocratic figures whose private affairs left public accounts curiously barren? Regardless of the truth, Charles Lennox's legacy was more than forgotten whispers. It was a recurring theme that would echo through European courts, especially in Rome, where another heir, Stuart, would soon ensconce himself amongst delicate fabrics, soft candlelight, and a gathering of men whose grace was impossible to overlook. In the annals of history, one figure stands out: James Francis Edward Stuart, affectionately dubbed the Old Pretender. His life was not one of thrones and reigning power, but rather existed in the elusive shadow of monarchy, a monarch in claim, a prince in exile, and a man enveloped in a fervent loyalty that often appeared more like a grand performance than a political reality. Born in 1688, he was the son of the deposed James II of England and VII of Scotland. His entry into the world coincided with the upheaval of the Glorious Revolution, which ousted his father and established Protestant constitutional monarchy in place of Catholic rule. Throughout his life, James battled to overturn this new order, crafting an alternative court characterized by nostalgia and emotional complexity rather than traditional governance. Operating from Rome under the auspices of papal support, James meticulously assembled a shadow monarchy, replete with courtiers, grand ceremonies, and noble titles, though devoid of land to rule. He engaged ambassadors, mustered arms, and established anthems, but it was his intimate connections that became particularly intriguing. Within this court, preserved in the lush Italian palaces and Vatican archives, whispers of refinement mixed with accusations of effeminacy and eccentric attachments circulated among observers. His exiled court became a sanctuary for displaced Jacobites and loyal aristocrats stripped of their fortunes. Many of these men were unmarried and drawn not solely by political fervor but by a profound admiration for James himself. Some of his closest companions were young, dashing nobles, whose devotion often verged on theatricality. One particular attendant became known for kissing the prince's hand daily with impassioned tears. Another penned lengthy letters lamenting the anguish of being apart from James for mere weeks. Although such expressions may have been typical within a court designed on chivalric norms, collectively they sparked curiosity. James embraced this fervent adoration, reciprocating with equally intense emotional responses, bestowing titles and responsibilities upon these loyal figures. His correspondence bore an affectionate tone, deeply emotional yet not overtly romantic, brimming with longing and attachment. While there exists no concrete evidence of impropriety, ample hints suggest these relationships transcended mere loyalty. Observers from distant courts noted the unusual dynamics of his inner circle, hinting that the environment in Rome was tinged with more emotional drama than political tension. Eventually, James entered a politically motivated marriage with the Polish princess Maria Klementyna Sobieska. Yet, this union was marked by estrangement and icy distance. Maria Klementyna frequently lamented James's emotional detachment and berated him for his choice of companions, hinting at something more complex and less tangible in the diplomatic missives of the era. James passed away in 1766, still clinging to the title of King James III, and found repose in the crypt of St. Peter's Basilica, like his son would decades later. His aspirations to reclaim the crown vanished alongside him. Yet, the unique culture he fostered during his exile, intimate, insular, and laden with emotional depth, left behind lingering inquiries about loyalty and affection. How does a sovereign sculpt a court when all that remains is the intangible connection to a devoted entourage? As the hopes for a Stuart monarchy diminished, a new form of royalty emerged, one more structured, yet still tinged with the same propensity for private admiration among men in military attire. Though the court returned to Britain, the secrets from James's past undoubtedly journeyed alongside it, continuing to cast an enigmatic shadow over the legacy he left behind. Prince George, Duke of Cambridge, stands as a striking figure in the golden era of Victorian military masculinity, a narrative painted across countless portraits. With his robust physique, impressive mustache, and an array of uniforms, he commanded the British Army for nearly 4 decades. As Queen Victoria's first cousin, he held the title of Royal Duke but lived much of his life ensconced in a world of medals, rigid protocol, and a decorum so thick that it obscured the truths lying beneath his carefully constructed exterior. Born in 1819, in the very same year as Queen Victoria, George matured in a society dictated by strict moral frameworks and relentless public scrutiny. Yet, amidst this backdrop, his private life stirred whispers and curiosity. Defying the norms, he married a commoner, the actress Sarah Fairbrother, in secrecy. Their union, however, was rendered invalid by the Royal Marriages Act due to her lack of noble lineage, leaving their children barred from succession. Officially, this marriage was non-existent, while socially, it was nothing short of scandalous. The distance in his emotional connections is perhaps most revealing. Throughout his storied military career, George formed a notably close bond with young male officers and aides. These were no mere subordinates. They were integral to his life, attending events, sharing private holidays, and showered with effusive praise and letters, even after their formal duties had concluded. Descriptions of one officer as the Duke's shadow and another as his round-the-clock companion paint a picture of a man whose relationships were deeply intense. His diaries, albeit fragmentary, unveil a window into his soul. They reflect admiration for these men in a way that transcends mere military regard, filled with vivid descriptions of their looks, quirks, and loyalty, expressed in lyrical prose resembling a love-struck reverie. One poignant entry from 1856 mournfully details the departure of a young officer, encapsulating a grief one might expect from the conclusion of a romantic liaison, rather than a professional transition. The military and aristocratic elite observed these peculiar attachments, yet the unspoken nature of Victorian conventions left much unsaid. There was no language to articulate such bonds without the threat of tangible repercussions. Thus, society turned to gossip and speculation while cleverly averting its gaze. George continued as Commander-in-Chief until 1895, resisting the tides of military reform and parliamentary influence, maintaining his personal freedoms with unwavering resolve. His passing in 1904 left him adorned in accolades and enveloped by formalities, yet the most profound connections of his life, hidden from historical accounts, linger as echoes within his legacy. For while he was enshrined in uniforms and medals, those tender relationships remain, especially poignant in the letters left behind, simple yet profoundly innocent, offering glimpses of emotion that would later spark speculation of something deeper. 19. Prince William, Duke of Gloucester. In a tale etched in brevity, Prince William, the Duke of Gloucester, lived a life that scarcely unfolded, a narrative cut short before his 12th year. He was born amidst the royal tumult as the sole surviving heir of Princess Anne, later crowned Queen Anne, and her spouse, Prince George of Denmark, emerging into the world in 1689 after a disheartening series of miscarriages and losses. From his first breath, William was not merely a child. He embodied a powerful symbol, a Protestant heir amidst a fervent tide of concern over legitimacy and an ever-looming threat of Catholic resurgence. Yet, even within the confines of his short existence, William carved traces of emotional complexity that defy simplistic categorization. Raised in an atmosphere replete with formality and expectation, his life was closely monitored by an entourage of educators, guards, and physicians, where each gesture and word was meticulously noted. Amidst the rigid courtly protocols and Latin lessons, he developed intimate relationships, particularly with his male tutors, whose connections seemed to transcend the expected warmth of a royal figure. Reverend Francis Gastrell, one of his tutors, later recounted William's noteworthy devotion to a younger male page, a name that resonated sweetly in William's personal correspondences. Another observer noted that the young Duke sought solace in the companionship of his peers, displaying a depth of affection more characteristic of a man far older, grieving visibly for their absence. While the documentation remains discreet, carrying the signatures of expectation and decorum, these accounts suggest that even as a boy, William experienced a profound emotional life shaped by close male bonds. In preserved letters from his schooling, William expressed a tender longing for certain young men of his household, bestowing them with fond titles and highlighting the joy their conversations brought to his heart, even prayerfully wishing for their everlasting presence. These sentiments might seem to reflect the innocent musings of a lonely child, yet historians argue that his emotional expression was strikingly mature, nuanced, articulate, and infused with an intensity that stood out amidst the theatrics of the royal court. However, William's fragile health began to decline around his 10th birthday, culminating in a diagnosis of hydrophilus, a malady that had troubled him since infancy but grew increasingly severe. By the time he reached 11, his condition took a grave turn, leading to his untimely death just shy of his 12th year. His passing shattered his mother, already burdened by the loss of her other children, and ignited a fresh political upheaval regarding the Protestant succession. His life quickly transformed into a poignant legend, a promise tragically unfulfilled. Yet, the intimate facets of his story, the letters, the snippets of journal entries, the affectionate notes to tutors and pages, were silently archived, almost as if the true emotional landscape of a boy could endanger the regal facade of the crown. While interpreting a child's words through an adult lens may be fraught with challenges, ignoring them might be even more perilous. For in these early expressions of unguarded affection lies the groundwork for the next royal figure on our journey, a king whose profound bond with another man would incite revolt, chaos in the court, and allegations of unmanly affection that proved too scandalous for the era of medieval England. King Richard II's existence unfolded like a cautionary narrative, tinged with personal vendettas. Ascending the throne at a tender age of 10, he was ousted by 32, meeting a swift demise thereafter. His reign was marked by a striking poetic flair, yet he fell victim to a tragic fate that resonated with theatricality. Richard was likely the first monarch of England to have his emotional bonds with men scrutinized openly. Rumours blossomed not just in whispers but echoed through the halls of Parliament, inked into the chronicles of historians, and drew the ire of noble adversaries overshadowed by the king's favoured companions. Among these individuals, one name stands out: Robert Devay, the Duke of Ireland. Richard raised him to lofty heights, bestowing titles and lands that flouted tradition and political common sense. The nobility, already wary of Richard's affinity for personal governance and extravagant display, found Devay's swift ascent intolerable. Yet it was not simply the politics that incensed them, it was the intimacy they perceived. Observers from Richard's time were unequivocal in their condemnation. Chroniclers, like Thomas Walsingham, accused Richard of exhibiting unmanly affection for his favourite, while others deemed their bond shameful, suggesting conduct that transcended mere court favouritism. A French observer went even further, insinuating a marital relationship that shocked and dismayed. These remarks were not mere insults. They were wielded as political instruments aiming to weaken Richard's authority by attacking the very nature of his affections. Devay, unfazed, revelled in his elevated status, flaunting his flamboyance, dining alone with the king, sidestepping council procedures, and receiving a ducal title typically reserved for royalty. Richard, in his absence, poured his heart into letters filled with longing. Upon Devay's return from Ireland, Richard even erected a triumphal arch to welcome him back, an exceptional diplomatic gesture. The backlash was immediate. A group of nobles, known as the Lords Appellant, accused Devay of treachery, compelling Richard into a humbling political withdrawal. Devay fled, igniting Richard's fury and humiliation, propelling him to solidify his power and seek ruthless vengeance. However, the memory of Devay lingered in Richard's heart. Supposedly mourning for him in a manner befitting more than a mere fallen ally, Richard's demise stemmed from both political blunders and the notion that he governed with the heart rather than with logic, that personal affections had overly influenced royal decisions. In an era demanding martial prowess, Richard's theatricality, reflective nature, and emotional transparency set him apart, unsettling his contemporaries. His support for the arts, obsession with elaborate ceremonies, and rejection of conventional masculinity ignited further contempt. Ultimately, when Henry Bolingbroke, later known as Henry IV, usurped the throne, he justified the coup on claims of tyranny. However, the broader public had already indicted Richard on more nebulous grounds: a perceived emotional frailty and an inescapable reliance on male companionship that clashed with medieval ideals of kingship. He perished in captivity, likely from starvation, buried in obscurity. His legacy, carefully expunged from statues and distorted in historical accounts, became a haunting lesson. A ruler could love too deeply, too openly, and in dangerously inappropriate directions. Yet the dynamics that Richard unveiled did not fade. They simply morphed with the ages. The next occupant of this royal lineage would carry forth both the crown and the complicity of a burden handed down from father to son, inscribed in chronicles and hidden beneath the glossy veneer of England's illustrious reign. In the regal drama of history, one young figure emerges as a beacon of hope and contradiction: Prince Henry Frederick. Born in 1594, he was the firstborn of King James VI and I, entering a world tumultuous with religious strife and royal schemes, a world poised on the brink of transformation into a theatrical monarchy. As the designated heir to both England and Scotland, Henry was meticulously crafted to personify strength and traditional masculinity, qualities that starkly contrasted with the complex nature of his father, James. Rather than indulging in the scandalous friendships shared by his father, notably with male favorites like Robert Carr and George Villiers, Henry was envisioned as a bastion of moral rectitude. Yet, beneath this carefully engineered facade, subtle echoes of emotional depth began to surface. From his youth, Henry forged deep connections with an all-male entourage, friends, mentors, and companions who mirrored not only his age but his fervent spirit. Their correspondence brims with vivid emotions, laden with poetic admiration, revealing bonds that seemingly transcended mere friendship. One figure that stands out is Robert Radcliffe, who found frequent mention in Henry's letters, deemed beloved, his absence lamented in a way that hinted at something deeper than mere camaraderie. While James's letters to Villiers were imbued with tender language, Henry's restrained style nonetheless hinted at similar emotional entanglements, though cloaked in the decorum of the time. Instead of elevating his companions to power, Henry chose to keep his relationships private, yet their emotional significance was unmistakable. Henry was not a strategist in the political arena. His heart was more aligned with idealism than manipulation, driven by a profound need for connection rather than utility. Tragically, his narrative was cut short when, at just 18, he succumbed to illness, perhaps typhoid fever, leaving an impact that rippled through the court. The response was immediate and profound. Grieving crowds, heartfelt poems, and a weeping Charles, Henry's younger brother, portrayed the deep loss felt at the royal court. James, typically distant, was shattered, not just losing an heir but a son who could have mended the fraying royal reputation. Though brief, Henry's life left behind an intricate tapestry of emotions, exhibiting the complexities of male relationships amidst the rigid decorum of the court, a time when expression of intimacy strayed far from convention. His death altered the course of the monarchy. From his absence emerged Charles, destined for a tragic fate of his own. Yet, the emotional resonance Henry fostered, the deep-seated bonds and unspoken yearnings behind their royal facades, would resurface generations later in the scandals that would echo through history, suggesting that behind the crowns and opulence lay a narrative rich with connection and longing. Prince Augustus Frederick, the Duke of Sussex, stood as the sixth son of King George III, untouched by the looming weight of the throne, which often dictated the lives of royal contenders. This very detachment became his sanctuary, a realm where he navigated the early 19th century, painting a picture of royal existence that was anything but conventional. Free from the chains of state obligation and the suffocating binds of protocol, Augustus found solace in the worlds of libraries and vivacious salons, surrounded by a cadre of men who flaunted their eccentricities as boldly as their affections. Born in 1773 during a transformative moment in British monarchy, when the grip of absolutism began to loosen, Augustus seemed disinterested in both power and prestige. Instead, he quickly established himself as the family's eccentric liberal, more likely to delve into radical literature than engage in military parades. A patron of the arts, an avid reader, and an ardent supporter of abolitionist movements, he made emotional choices that consistently perplexed his family and scholars alike. His romantic escapades included 2 illegal marriages, first to Lady Augusta Murray, a commoner whose union, lacking royal permission, was annulled, and later to Lady Cecilia Underwood, similarly unapproved by the Crown. Neither wife was bestowed with the title of Duchess of Sussex, and neither marriage yielded an heir welcomed into royal circles. While protocol was the official reason for their exclusion, whispers among historians suggest it was Augustus's unconventional emotional tetherings that truly distanced him from the expected royal narrative. Throughout his life, Augustus cultivated a tightly knit entourage of male artists, writers, and society figures, all woven into the rich fabric of his existence. One of his closest companions, a gentleman poet who also catalogued Augustus's extensive library, resided on the grounds of Kensington Palace for nearly a decade. Their correspondence, warm, affectionate, and often adorned with monograms, features and fragments, revealing a bond that, while discreet, spoke volumes. A royal aide once described Augustus as a man of private devotions and odd attachments, a delicate, non-committal remark repeated in multiple testimonies. Though his life didn't inspire public scandal, it nonetheless kept him at a deliberate distance from the machinations of royal duty. When Queen Victoria ascended the throne, Augustus emerged as the only uncle she held in fond regard, gentle, learned, and without ambition. He embodied the bookish intellectual in a lineage of military leaders. In 1843, his passing marked the end of a life that would find rest beside his second unrecognized spouse in mausoleum, distinct from the main royal crypts, a silent metaphor for a life spent just outside the acceptance of royal authority. Yet, Augustus's legacy continues, not etched in grand deeds, but rather in the subtle whispers of a life lived amidst the rules of monarchy. He represents a glimpse behind the rigid facade of power, those who quietly move through history, whose desires lay hidden yet resonant, tucked among poetry collections and sealed letters, evoking a strain of gentle nonconformity that would echo through the generations. In time, this legacy would don uniforms, wield sabers, and leave estates to those steadfast males who loyally lingered at their sides. In the tapestry of Victorian history, Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught, emerges as an archetype of composed order, adorned in uniform and bedecked with medals. For over 4 decades, he steadfastly served in the British Army, crisscrossing the vast empire, representing the crown beyond its borders, and exuding the polished authority of a seasoned leader. Yet, beneath the strict military exterior and the glittering accolades lies a narrative often overlooked, one that unfolded in the quieter moments of royal life rather than amidst the clamor of war. This tale isn't one of scandal. Instead, it speaks of loyalty and a singular, enduring male companionship that graced his life from youth until his final breath. Born in 1850 as the 3rd son of Queen Victoria, Prince Arthur quickly became one of her favored children, a position he ventured into with unwavering dedication. While his elder brother Edward indulged in theatrical charisma and high-stakes gambling, Arthur meticulously built his legacy defined by discipline, ultimately ascending to the esteemed rank of Field Marshal and undertaking the role of Governor-General of Canada. Clothed in an impeccable military image, complete with a sword and flawless mustache, he wed Prussian Princess Louise Margaret, fathering children as he maintained a stable, albeit somewhat distant, marriage. However, it was Arthur's bond with a singular man, his camp aide, which truly defined his personal narrative. This aide served loyally for decades, fostering a companionship that transcended the norms of military protocol. Frequently found by Arthur's side, this man's presence extended beyond mere assistance. He became a confidant and the recipient of Arthur's most cherished gifts. Their relationship blossomed early in Arthur's career, surviving postings across the globe, from India to South Africa and Canada. In a time when royal men rarely strayed far from their male companions, this bond stood out for its emotional depth and unwavering stability. The aide was not merely a presence, he was a constant fixture in Arthur's life. Upon returning to England, accompanying him to royal events, and sharing winters and retirement, their companionship flourished. Arthur's letters, preserved in archives, reveal a formal yet distinctly affectionate tone, referencing shared experiences and the enduring solace brought by his companion's presence. These were not declarations of love or drama, but rather decades of intimacy that outlived marriages, assignments, and royal duties. Upon his demise in 1942 at the age of 91, Arthur left behind not only personal mementos for his family but also a generous legacy for his retired aide, a gesture that, while not entirely unprecedented, sparked curiosity. Why this aide? Why such a substantial bequest? The palace remained silent, yet those familiar with Arthur's stoic life understood the deeper implications. Even Queen Victoria had remarked on her son's comfort around his men, perhaps highlighting an unspoken truth. Arthur's legacy remains tranquil, devoid of scandal or sensationalism, marked by a lengthy service record, a polished public persona, and the lingering essence of a friendship that weathered the rise and fall of empires. From this soft echo of companionship, we step back to a preceding generation, a figure who, though linked to the throne through blood, was as much remembered for fathering a queen as for the unusual attachments formed far from the watchful eyes of royalty. Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent and Strathern, is often remembered not so much for his own significance, but rather for the legacy he left behind. Being the fourth son of King George III, he was not expected to wield much power or influence. However, destiny had a different course planned for him. His daughter, born in 1819, would ascend to the throne as Queen Victoria, fundamentally altering the trajectory of British history. Yet, the man himself remains a fascinating enigma, an ever-present figure in royal history, yet shrouded in obscurity. Known for his strict demeanor and unwavering principles, Edward lived the life of a soldier. His tenure saw him serving in Gibraltar, Canada, and the Caribbean, where he led troops with such zeal that he earned the nickname the Martinet of the Army. Beneath this stern facade, though, lay a person deeply entwined in a web of secrecy and intense personal attachments, particularly to younger European officers whose names seldom graced official records, yet emerged in his private correspondence and court discussions. Much of Edward's life unfolded outside Britain, whether in colonial territories or European courts. During his service in Gibraltar, he cultivated personal relationships with his aides, continuing to correspond with them long after their formal associations ended. One particular officer, a French-speaking nobleman from Switzerland, frequently appeared in Edward's letters, portrayed as a dear companion. Their shared experiences were intimate, marked by joint accommodations, extensive travels, and a bond described as unmatched by brotherhood. Although Edward married Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld for dynastic reasons, their marriage was short-lived and pragmatic, producing a daughter just before Edward's untimely bout with pneumonia. Tragically, he left behind a widow and a looming future queen. Despite his marriage not being unhappy, it was conducted at a distance, leading some to ponder if his true affections had already settled elsewhere. Historians tread cautiously, noting that Edward's household appeared notably male-centric and his international domestic arrangements seemed close yet discreet. No scandals erupted, and public accusations remained absent. However, private letters reveal subtle implications from European observers regarding the Duke's relationships, which defied the romantic norms of his era. One Belgian diplomat noted that Edward's court in Gibraltar resembled a brotherhood rather than a traditional military environment, alluding to certain privileges enjoyed by his closest aides. An Austrian observer pointed out that the Duke's circle was oddly consistent in youth and allure, leading to observations that were recorded but ultimately left unaddressed. As Queen Victoria rose to prominence, Edward's legacy receded into the shadows, becoming merely the father who enabled a monarchy. His letters and friendships faded into the background, overshadowed by his daughter's accomplishments. Yet, as with all royal legacies, Edward's emotional connections did not vanish. They reverberated through generations. His grandson, who donned both British and German military uniforms, bore the weight of this hidden legacy, a reflection of bonds formed in the shadows of two crumbling empires, raising unsettling questions long after the chaos of war had settled. Charles Edward, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, was a figure whose life existed in the delicate interplay between two fading empires, draped in dual identities and countless unspoken truths. Born into British royalty as the grandson of Queen Victoria, he would ultimately exit this world as a tarnished German duke, all while navigating the intricate political landscape of the early 20th century. Yet, beyond the tumult of nationalism and the encroaching forces of fascism, a more subtle story lingers, one steeped in intimate male friendships, intricate alliances, and a personal journey that continues to baffle modern historians. Arriving in 1884 as the posthumous child of Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, Charles Edward was shaped by loss before he even drew breath. Raised in England, his upbringing reflected the refined manners of Windsor royalty, but internal struggles marked his existence. He preferred the company of books and music over the strict discipline of military drills, an awkwardness that seemed to set him apart. Then, in a pivotal year of 1900, destiny took a sharp turn. At just 16, he unexpectedly ascended to the title of Duke following his uncle's demise, thrust into a role that felt foreign and daunting. With little grasp of the German language or culture, he was charged with managing a duchy he barely understood, yet he adapted, perhaps more accommodating than authentic, embracing German nationalism and military commitments in an effort to fulfill the expectations of his new identity. However, his private life revealed a curious isolation. Although united in marriage to Princess Victoria Adelaide and fathering 5 children, the emotional depth of their bond seemed shallow. Instead, Charles Edward's affections appeared to lie within a tight-knit circle of male confidants, advisors, and party figures who gradually gained significant sway over him. Notably, Fritz H., a well-connected figure in his court, emerged as a constant presence, a relationship that evolved from professional obligation to a more intricate bond, documented extensively in private diaries and communications. This enduring companionship spanned 2 decades and drew the attention of British intelligence, which scrutinized their connection amid Charles Edward's increasingly public ties to the Nazi regime. Despite his political affiliations with Hitler signaling a departure from ethical norms, Charles Edward's inner court held an enigmatic allure, characterized by a strange insularity akin to a secretive sect. Women and outsiders were often distanced, as loyalty and power circulated within a strictly male enclave. As the war ended, the Duke faced rapid decline. A high-profile supporter of the Nazis, he was arrested, impoverished, and stripped of royal regard, erased from the annals of British history. Yet, post-war investigators uncovered a trove of untranslated letters, many correspondences with Fritz marked as confidential, held in shadows, perhaps revealing more than the world was ever meant to see. In the twilight of his life, Charles Edward faded into obscurity, perhaps a living testament to the complex intersection of loyalty, duty, and longing for connection, even as the storms of ideology raged around him. In stepping from the ravaged courts of post-war Germany into the understated corridors of Hanoverian royal life, we discern a heartening familiarity, a young prince ensconced in whispers, carefully maneuvered away from scrutiny, even as dark clouds loomed, poised to reshape his reality forever. 26. Prince George of Cumberland. The royal records provide little insight into the life of Prince George of Cumberland. He never ascended to a throne, commanded troops, nor crafted scandals that would enthrall historians, at least, not overtly. Born in 1819 alongside Queen Victoria, he was her cousin and peer, the progeny of Ernest Augustus, the Duke of Cumberland, who eventually became King of Hanover. Upon his father's demise, George claimed the Hanoverian crown, adopting the title of King George V of Hanover, a designation of far greater significance in the realm of German politics than in British consciousness. However, long before any regal title or Hanover's ultimate severance from the British monarchy, Prince George was moulded in a court environment that was subtly but profoundly distinct. Guided by the watchful and conservative authority of his father, Ernest Augustus, whose own existence was ensnared by whispers and the burden of a carefully curated public persona, George's upbringing was notably cloistered and perhaps excessively guarded. At the crux of his existence lay George's bonds with male tutors and companions during his formative years. While royal children typically had governesses and instructors, George's arrangements garnered attention even then. A carefully chosen cadre of male educators, many with military pasts or scholarly nobility backgrounds, were frequently in his presence, both academically and in daily life. Some lingered far longer than tradition dictated. One instructor, in particular, was often seen at George's side, enjoying a level of intimacy typically reserved for family or religious figures. Letters exchanged between George and these early educators, a number of which still exist in the Hanoverian archives, reveal an emotional dependency that was striking for their time. He cherished one such tutor, referring to him as his true heart and quiet mirror, expressions that, while they might suggest mere affection, were nevertheless unusual from a teenage royal directed toward an older academic. Correspondences from court officials highlighted George's reluctance toward replacement of his chosen mentors, indicating a strong desire to remain close to his favored companions. Whispers began to circulate discreetly among Hanover's aristocracy, where insinuations were made while saying very little at all. A confidential report forwarded to the British Foreign Office in the early 1840s insinuated that King George's attachments warranted closer examination, advising discretion due to his father's legacy. While details remained elusive, it was clear that Prince George, now King George V of Hanover, inherited not only a throne but also a shadowy pattern of behavior that was difficult to articulate. Eventually, George married Princess Marie of Saxe-Altenburg and fathered children, yet by then, his reputation had already been deftly shaped behind the scenes. Following Prussia's annexation of Hanover in 1866, which obliterated his kingdom, George found himself in exile within Austria. His court density diminished, and his sway dwindled, yet his close circle, particular male attendants lingering from his youth, remained unchanged. In 1878, he passed away, nearly forgotten by the British and relegated to a ceremonial footnote in German history. Nevertheless, his life bore witness to the unmistakable marks of a royal molded by secret loyalties, emotional dependencies, and the maintenance of relationships that were never openly acknowledged. From the hushed corridors of Hanover to the muted halls of Windsor, the next royal would traverse a comparably intricate path, a prince with a renowned sibling and a life brief yet resonant with echoes of enduring royal patterns, closeness in the unexpected and silence where there might have been more. Prince Henry, Duke of Albany, occupies a discreet yet intriguing niche in the compounded narrative of Victorian royalty. Born in 1859, he was the youngest offspring of Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, entering a world already steeped in tradition, strict protocols, and lofty aspirations. While his elder siblings were groomed for esteemed roles in geopolitics or military exploits, Henry was marked by vulnerability. A slender figure, intellectual and artistic in nature, he bore the burden of hemophilia, a condition that made him more susceptible to harm. His path diverged from that of his brothers, guiding him away from the battleground into the less perilous realm of royal obligations, such as tours, honors, and ceremonies. Yet, it was within these confines that a different narrative began to unfold, an intricate web of deep male friendships and emotional connections that defined his life, distinct from conventional duty. Unlike his brother Prince Leopold, who mingled with the cultured elite and embraced openly artistic and homosexual circles, Henry's demeanor was more reserved. Nevertheless, whispers around the court often highlighted their shared gentility and their mutual indifference towards women outside of royal necessitations. Henry found solace in those who surrounded him, particularly his valet and an appointed secretary, who were constants during his travels and confidants until the end. One such figure, a former classmate turned aide, was described as unwaveringly devoted, with their companionship noted by palace staff as exceptionally close-knit. Though no scandal surfaced, their relationship raised eyebrows, particularly to astute observers of the time, marking a silent acknowledgement of intimacy that skirted the boundaries of propriety. Henry's sparse surviving letters reveal a longing for connection, expressing the solitude of royal existence and the joy found in true understanding. His words resonate with a subtle familiarity reminiscent of other noblemen seeking comfort in male companionship. In 1882, he married Princess Helena of Wald and Pyrmont, a union seen more as a pragmatic arrangement than a romance. Their relationship, while cordial, was described as emotionally distant, abruptly ended by Henry's untimely death from a cerebral hemorrhage in 1884, at the tender age of 30. His funeral was unceremonious, his narrative eclipsed by his son, Prince Charles Edward, who would ascend to Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, his own life fraught with controversy. Before the sands of time officially shifted, discreet measures were taken. Henry's correspondence with his male friends was purged from the family records, and they were discreetly compensated and eased from royal duties. No public accusations or denials ever emerged, just the deliberate effort to erase a private space that had thrived beyond the realms of public visibility. Ultimately, while Henry's legacy was tucked away in royal shadow, it marked merely a chapter in a longer saga, an echo from the grand courts of an earlier Scottish king whose own intimate bonds once ruffled the feathers of royalty long before the Victorian age imposed its quiet decorum. Before the crowns of Scotland and England intertwined, the Scottish court bore witness to rulers who loved recklessly and ruled unpredictably. Among these monarchs was King James V, born in 1512. A vibrant and extravagant figure, his life was a tapestry woven with the threads of beauty, loyalty, and passionate devotion from his male courtiers. While history often fixates on his marriages and losses in battle, a juicier narrative lies veiled in diplomatic notes and court intrigue, tales of affectionate bonds between James and his male companions. Ascending the throne as a mere child following his father King James IV's fatal defeat at the Battle of Flodden, the young James found himself encircled by regents and nobles during his formative years. By the time he seized control in his late teens, a profound craving for loyalty surged within him, often rewarding it handsomely, especially from the young men who captured his favor. Early murmurs of his court favored a gifted musician and poet whose swift ascendancy raised eyebrows among the aristocracy. This bright favorite enjoyed lands, titles, and exclusive proximity to the monarch, with whispers of their closeness amplified by the king's public affection. James' court was a realm of intimacy and artistry, a stage rich with pageantry and celebration. He embraced extravagance, filling his spaces with music and art, commissioning performances that often featured his favored companions. Observers noted the emotional and poetic atmosphere, starkly contrasting the stoic masculinity typical of the era. In one notable instance, a French ambassador relayed insights about the king's inclination for beauty and youth in his courtly companions, implying a preference for personal pleasure over counsel. While James' royal marriages produced heirs, prominently Mary, Queen of Scots, his male friends remained integral to his life. The women adorned crowns, while the men enjoyed closest proximity, gifted lands, or quietly dismissed when drawn into the public eye. Kingship brought its burdens, and at age 30, following a disastrous defeat at the Battle of Solway Moss, he passed away, belatedly lamenting the birth of his daughter and the demise of his aspirations for a male heir with the haunting words, "It came with a lass, and it will go with a lass." Left behind was a kingdom engulfed in chaos, a young daughter unable to lead, and a legacy that would evolve into legend, meticulously polishing over the more intimate aspects of his story. Yet, as the centuries turned, James' narrative would echo anew in modern realms of design and discrete artistic societies, where legacies of closeness and inheritance would resurface, capturing whispers of the past in the vibrant chatter of tabloids. 29. Prince David Viscount Leigh, officially known as David Albert Charles Armstrong Jones, and currently the second Earl of Snowdon, has consistently lived in the shadows of royal life. Born in 1961 to Princess Margaret and renowned photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, David entered a vastly changing monarchy, one that began to swap its imperial legacy for the glitter of celebrity and its grandeur for the inescapable lens of the tabloids. While he may not carry the title of prince, he shares royal lineage, embodying the traits of a craftsman and an innovator. Over the years, whispers have circulated, suggesting that his relationships and emotional bonds often flout traditional expectations. From the start, David was distinct. Unlike his royal cousins who mastered the art of ribbon cutting, he devoted himself to craftsmanship, attending the prestigious Parnham House in Dorset to learn cabinet making. His skills soon led him to be recognized not merely as a craftsman, but as a celebrated designer, standing out among royals with a genuinely independent career. David's design aesthetic combined minimalism with elegance, reflecting a nuanced sophistication. He crafted bespoke desks for billionaires, tables for international dignitaries, and engaged with students, illustrating a royal's mastery of artisanal tools. Yet, the world of elite design, filled with its own intricacies, starkly contrasted with the rigid protocol of the palace. David's career intersected with architects, artists, and fashion designers, many openly gay, forming the energetic core of London's queer artistic scene in the 80s and 90s. It was here that David thrived, attending private functions, gallery unveilings, and dinners with names less highlighted in Tatler, yet often noted in the gossip columns of the Evening Standard. While tangible scandals rarely arose, his continuous presence in this milieu fueled conjecture, particularly with several prominent gay personalities who spoke of their emotionally deep connections with him, based on trust and not titles. A notable association with a renowned interior designer often placed them together at private amenities and weekend retreats, catching the tabloid's eye, which started splashing ambiguous headlines about David's unconventional associations with the Queen's nephew. What is intriguing about Lindley is the modern aspect of his ambiguity. He entered marriage, embraced fatherhood, and presented an immaculate public demeanor, yet maintained an essence of quiet deviation. Navigating between royal heritage and creative liberty, he was poised and charming, yet crucially discreet. Rumors never materialized into scandals, whispers starved of attention failed to ignite, and the palace notably refrained from public commentary, adhering to the age-old strategy of royal silence. Eventually, Lindley ascended to the position of chairman at Christie's UK, solidifying his role in an elite sphere where taste dictated value and distinctions blurred. His divorce in 2020, though chronicled widely, was recounted as a civil end, devoid of emotional discord. Among those familiar with royal dynamics, an implicit narrative lingered, of a man bred in privilege, drawn to artistry, a royal nestled amidst creators, an understated figure in settings where expectations are discreetly navigated and identities subtly managed rather than publicly proclaimed. In this delicate arena between image and closeness, David Lindley adds to the extensive roster of royal men whose lives resonate with more questions than answers, their subtle ambiguities often revealing more than any potential scandal might expose. As for the next royal narrative, it unfolds not within artistic studios or elegant salons, but across embassies and airfields. A prince who took to the skies, sought liberation, and maintained a diary whispering of a heart fraught with complexities that the crown was reluctant to acknowledge. 30. Prince William of Gloucester. In the annals of history, certain royals appear as though they are adrift in time. Prince William of Gloucester, the intrepid aviator, diplomat, and adventurer, certainly fell into this category. Born in 1941, he was the charismatic first cousin of Queen Elizabeth II and the elder son of Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester. He possessed a striking presence, almost as if he had been conjured from a bygone era and mistakenly placed in the Cold War's tumultuous landscape. He was known for sporting aviator sunglasses, scaling volcanoes, and piloting aircraft with ease. Yet, beneath the shimmering exterior of this adventurous royal lay an intricately woven emotional tapestry that remains shrouded in mystery to this day. An alumnus of Cambridge and Stanford, William was not only intelligent and charming but also adept in the nuanced language of diplomacy. He joined the Foreign Office in the 1960s, ultimately serving in Nigeria during a time of significant post-colonial upheaval. While he officially represented the royal crown, he also mingled in circles that would have sent shockwaves through the Victorian royal court, liberal salons and progressive social gatherings where discussions of identity, including queer identity, unfolded candidly. Throughout his all-too-brief life, William fostered deeply intimate friendships with men, relationships that sparked curiosity among his contemporaries and concern within palace walls. His circle was filled with fellow diplomats, artists, and writers, many of whom identified as gay or bisexual, existing slightly beyond the fringes of Britain's traditional social hierarchy. A notable friend, a fellow diplomat, frequently appeared in William's journal entries, which he referred to as "my anchor," noting that he was the only individual willing to speak truthfully without demanding royal acknowledgement in return. These journals, while never fully published, have surfaced in biographies, revealing poignant glimpses into William's psyche. He often expressed discomfort with the rigorous expectations of royal life, confessing feelings of being scrutinized and constrained, and he found solace among those who neither demanded nor conformed to societal norms. While no overt admissions of his feelings surface, his writings drip with longing, introspection, and a persistent re-evaluation of the roles he was pressured to adopt. Notably, William postponed marriage longer than his family anticipated. His romantic life, often a topic of tabloid intrigue, particularly revolved around his relationship with Zsuzsa Starkov, a Hungarian-born model and the daughter of a diplomat. Although genuine, their partnership was reportedly stymied by palace pressure deeming her unfit for royal union. Some historians argue that such narratives conveniently cast shadows over suspicions regarding William's emotional bonds with his male friends, an age-old royal tactic of diverting attention from one story to suppress another. In 1972, at the young age of 30, tragedy struck. William lost his life in a plane crash during an air race, piloting the aircraft himself. The official response was somber, and his passing resonated with profound sadness among those who knew him, not merely for his youth and charm, but because he symbolized a vision of royal potential that was never fully realized. This unrealized dream encompassed a world where identity could coexist in pluralistic forms, where roles might be willingly embraced rather than imposed, and where love could flourish without disguise. His funeral was private, and his legacy appears relegated to obscurity. Yet, for those discerning enough to grasp the nuances, to read between the lines, and to remember the names omitted from official chronicles, Prince William of Gloucester stands out as one of modern royalty's most compelling enigmas. Not a scandal nor a revelation, but a man whose quest for both literal and emotional freedom was abruptly halted, leaving behind, like so many before him, the haunting impression of a life far richer and more complex than history acknowledges. God,